All right, welcome back. So we in the previous video we talked about the air system, having a prime mover, ductwork, and how the air exchanges go and stuff like that. But not everybody lives in fairy tale land and has a perfect system that works without faults. Some of you have faults. Some of you, don't even know you have faults on there. I get calls all the time when it comes to the electrical system. I've losing power, I have something not running right, my generator started for no apparent reason, transferred my ATS. But when it comes to the air system, Steve, what are some of the calls that you get for problems?
Funny, Dave, we just completed a project. The call I got was the 5th floor is low on static pressure. It's a 5-story building with a built-up system on the roof. So I went ahead and went out to the facility, and where it begins with me is right at the front doors. We look at the building envelope. I want to know what this building's doing as a whole. I used to keep fish tanks as a kid, and so you're recreating an artificial environment for those very expensive saltwater fish. Our buildings are the same way. We're spending a lot of money. The most expensive thing we do is provide comfort and air conditioning to a building. The largest motors that we own provide the cooling. The air handlers provide the air. So when I walk up to a building, the first thing I feel is, do I have nice, cool, conditioned air coming out of the front doors? Or do I have warm, dirty air chasing me in as I walk in? Buildings should be under a positive air pressure to keep unfiltered, unconditioned air out.
What does that mean? What does it mean when you talk about positive pressure? What does that mean?
So what that means is you're bringing in more air into the building than you're exhausting out. So it prevents all your openings when the doors open as you're entering the building or your loading dock. It prevents or tries to keep out the air that hasn't been filtered and it hasn't been run through the cooling or heating system. And many times the buildings are in such a negative air pressure situation. You've got elevator shafts whistling, front doors that have a nice whistle to them as you enter. You can tell this when you walk into a lobby in many buildings. Elevator shafts are notorious to be chimneys. They can send air flying up because they're the path of least resistance. So if you're standing in front of the elevator and waiting to meet the engineer, and as the doors open, you get a nice tone change in the air velocity, you've got some system problems occurring here. If a building's in a negative air pressure, you also have problems that they can alter the process that you're performing. There's called cascading static pressures. So in a clean room, for instance, you would want higher pressure in your clean area and less as you get away from that clean concentration. NASA gave us a call one time. You probably remember this call, and it was up at JPL.
Yeah.
And they had a problem with the Mars rover facility, the high bay spacecraft assembly clean room. We went out and found all the losses and static losses and helped solve the problem. But their biggest driver was they were using too much deionized water to maintain humidity for the spacecraft. All this is critical, but for a spacecraft assembly building with hydrazine and highly flammables, humidity is critical because you get a low humidity, you can have high static electricity problems, and it can become an explosive environment. In our office buildings, we're also conditioning, controlling humidity, and filtering this air. And if it's in a negative situation, you're working against the system. When you look at odors in a building, for instance, you can have a reprographics or a copy center located on one floor. I've had buildings that complained about odors migrating from one floor to the next through the elevator shafts or through the stairwells. And so when you walk into a facility, you're using all your senses. You're listening, you're feeling, you're using your nose, you're sensing, what's making it through this building that shouldn't be. And then you ask yourself, okay, why is this the case? CO2 dilution, so carbon dioxide, we exhaust constantly. We're polluting animals. We do a lot of off-gassing. So when you get them concentrated into an office space, you need enough outside air to dilute that, to take out that carbon dioxide and bring in that beautiful, fresh outside air. Carbon monoxide, car exhaust. A lot of buildings have parking structures that are built contiguous or built on top of or underneath of the facility. If the building's in a negative air pressure condition, you can draw in carbon monoxide, which is odorless, colorless, and tasteless.
And that would be from their underground parking.
Correct.
That they have elevators bringing them up into the building.
Correct. Exactly. I've measured up to 9 part per million in common lobbies that were built on or above parking structures. Again, the building is not in a proper static pressure configuration. The garage exhausters can't overcome it, so you've created a negative effect. Starving return air. I've met with engineers that said we're getting ready to cut openings in our return air above the ceiling because we don't get enough return back to the air handler. That air handler is running so far over capacity that you couldn't open the wall up and relieve it. It's not that you're lacking return air openings. It's you're not getting the supply air into the occupied space. Restroom exhaust systems. We take them for granted. For us, you walk into a restroom, okay, it doesn't stink in here, the exhaust is working. That design CFM that was part of that restroom exhaust system is part of the building's HVAC system. That's part of the removing or air exchanges. So as you're bringing in fresh air, many buildings use the restroom exhaust as the relief system. Hotels are notorious for using that. That's how hotel rooms stay fresh. You undercut the hallway door, you have a fresh air supply in the corridor. That fresh air makes it in through the room and out through the exhaust in the restroom. When we've gone in and solved these problems with restroom exhaust, we've watched the carbon dioxide levels lower just from remediating these systems. The one part of it, when I meet with engineers, they say, well, I probably have one big giant leak somewhere in the system. There's got to be a big hole somewhere. And it's rare that we find the smoking gun, and that's what I like to joke about, because it's not one big leak. It's accumulation of many small leaks. When you start adding up a 1/16 of an inch gap over hundreds of feet long, and you do the calculations, you can see how you're losing 20% capacity on a system. That leakage is not in the building. It's in the unconditioned space. It's not making it to the occupied personnel. So all of these areas that we start with, again, at the front door, through the elevators, clear up to the fan room. If I can't open that fan room door, if it's difficult for me to pull on it, then I know I've got a heavy negative condition in that fan room. That's not correct. That's not what we're after. So there's ways to solve that problem, and there's reasons that these problems exist.
So if somebody, again, you get a call for it, they're thinking of it more in the occupied space, which we'll get to in a minute. But really what you're saying is when you're walking in, these are signs that are telling you that there is something internally not working right, system not running properly, duct leakage. We know we've got some issues spread out through the whole building. It isn't a issue. It's a cumulative issue that's going on. But that's really what it starts at. Yes. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that'll watch this. They'll say, like, they're going to start listening. You know, what's my front door doing? Is it whistling? Is it this whistling? So that's really where it starts at. When you come in, you know it isn't a fifth floor issue. You know it's a building issue. As we found out,
right.
It was a building issue on there. So what I like to do is I like us now to talk about it from a building issue now, and then let's take it to the occupied floor on there. Okay?
Sure.